way from another cat thief to somebody impersonating an FBI agent. We have a bunch of wild stories lined up for you today as we cover part 2 of the top 10 terrifying neighbors that might live next door to you. Starting off our list in our number 10 spot, we have Impeccable Timing. Okay. This story is one that has quite the plot twist that I absolutely was not expecting. It reads, quote, "There is this one guy in my neighborhood. We seem to operate on the same schedule since we see each other at the bus stop almost every day. We never talk much, he always just asks me for a cigarette and I usually give him one. The problem is that I don't have a sensible schedule. My classes are at a different time every day and get rescheduled more often than not, and I make my own work hours, so I just come in whenever. Last time I saw him was a couple of hours ago. I'm walking home, middle of the night, and some guy jumps me from the back saying, 'Do you have a cigarette?' I turn around and it's the same guy just strolling around the neighborhood at 2:30 a.m. looking for somebody to lend him a smoke. My instincts are telling me that something is seriously wrong here, but what do you guys think? I don't feel like this is just a strange coincidence." In our number 9 spot today, we have The Agent. This neighbor story comes from someone who lived in an apartment building and who had one neighbor who was exceptionally nosy and suspicious of others in the building. So much so that she decided to do something absolutely insane, which was to stage phone calls with FBI headquarters about other tenants in the building and what she called alarming behavior. This behavior she's referencing would have to be something super outlandish and crazy for her to go to those lengths, right? Oh no, we're talking like people coming home after 9 p.m. and she's like, better call the FBI. The story then continues on to say that she even went as far as to post a fake government notice on the walls of the building. This lady just will not quit. So, guess what made this lady stop all of her nonsense? Well, the storyteller decided to take a page out of her book and they staged a fake phone call. This time, they just loudly chatted about the illegalities of everything that this lady was doing, including her impersonation of an FBI agent. Who would have guessed? Shortly after this staged call, the neighbor lady stopped. In our number 8 spot today, we have Peeping Tom. Okay, so this one is truly one of the creepiest things I have ever heard. This story comes from a man who lives with his wife and they have a downstairs neighbor who is certainly something else. First, this neighbor approaches the wife and says to her that he can hear her and her husband all the time, with a super creepy and sinister grin on his face, which is already absolutely horrifying to even think of. This is already enough to just give you the heebie-jeebies, but this story unfortunately gets worse. One day the wife was painting the porch of the house and accidentally dropped a paintbrush. She bent down to pick it up and this is when she had to see what no one should have to see. Through the slits in the deck, she saw this creepy neighbor's eyes staring up at her. Tell me why this guy was just laying under the porch staring up at her being a weirdo Peeping Tom while she painted the porch. They have no idea how long he was there for, and honestly, they probably don't even want to know. In our number 7 spot today, we have The Next Door Dentist. This story comes from someone whose neighbor was a dentist and he lived with his wife, and they apparently had one kinda creepy child. Our storyteller explains that this weird family next door once absolutely freaked out at them for planting some flowers alongside their fence. They didn't go into detail about why, but the dentist's family screamed as they said they didn't want anyone digging up their land. That's a reasonable request for sure, but also a little suspicious. The dentist's family ended up moving out 2 years after this strange incident, and our storyteller didn't really think of them much until 3 years after that. In an absolutely wild but not surprising turn of events, the dentist dad ended up being arrested for kidnapping his patients. Our storyteller still has never had confirmation, but truly believes that there are still bodies located there on the property. In our number 6 spot today, we have Always Watching. This story is about the family that lived across the street from our storyteller when they were in high school. Our storyteller would walk to and from school every day, and while the mornings were normal, when he was coming home every day is when things got weird. This family across the street would sit and stare out the window at this guy every single day as he returned from school. I couldn't imagine this happening to me once, let alone every day. That truly sounds like an absolute nightmare. To make things just a little more strange, it apparently wasn't uncommon for them to get phone calls from their scary neighbor's phone number, but when they answered, there just wasn't anyone on the other line. I feel like I would have immediately put my house up for sale or something, because every night I would feel like I need to sleep with one eye open. In our number 5 spot today, we have The Cat Came Back. Okay, last time, on part 1, we had a weird neighbor cat story, and this time we have another one that is arguably weirder and creepier. I'm just saying, if you've got a cat and a strange neighbor, you might want to watch out, because these stories are putting me on edge. This one goes, quote, "There was an old man who lived next door to my last house. I'd wake up every morning to about an hour of 'here kitty kitty kitty.' My cat once went missing for about a week and he came back with a shaved stomach." Listen, Without the whole neighbor part, that story would still be weird and concerning. I'm glad the cat came back, but why in the world was his stomach shaved? Maybe it wasn't the neighbor, I mean there's no proof per se, but man, the whole thing is definitely weird. If it wasn't the neighbor, then what on earth was he up to calling for a cat every morning? I have a lot of questions about this one, and I don't think that any of them are getting answered anytime soon. In our number 4 spot today, we have the photographer. This strange neighbor story is a very short but exceptionally effective one. The storyteller wrote just, quote, "They sent me pictures of myself mowing the lawn. I had no idea." Imagine getting a photo of yourself that you had no idea someone else took, let alone your neighbor. I feel like I would always feel as if someone's eyes were on me after that. Just full of paranoia to the brim. In our number 3 spot today, we have the eavesdropper. This neighbor story is about someone who loves to eavesdrop and get involved in things that certainly aren't their business, and they managed to take it way too far. This person wrote, quote, "We had this neighbor that was always in our business. He would tap our phone lines and listen to our problems and then call my grandfather to tell him what was going on with my parents' marriage. We would also find footprints in fresh snowfall walking all around our property and onto our deck. Weird dude." Honestly, I feel like I would be making up some crazy outlandish stories just to test to see if this man really was listening in. I would say that I had like treasure buried in the backyard or something and see if he tried to dig it up. This story certainly is strange, but the storyteller seems fairly casual about the whole experience, so it seems as though it's a story that stuck with them but didn't bother them too much. In our number 2 spot today, we have the vet visit. Okay, I don't know what it is with people and pets, but neighbors seriously need to leave other people's alone. This story starts out with a storyteller taking their dog for a pretty regular or standard visit to the vet. While on this visit, however, things start to take a turn when the vet tells them to stop feeding the dog human food. This confused them because they were quite strict about only feeding their dog food. Well, after a little investigation, it turns out that the neighbor this storyteller had, this one who would often call the police about this dog's behavior even though it was a nice, sweet Labrador that showed no aggression at all, yeah, apparently this neighbor had been leaning over the fence to feed the dog food scraps, mop water, and some other harmful things. This one might actually be worse than the neighbors who were stealing the cats. This is truly next level, and I'm glad that the vet was able to catch this and the storyteller could get to the bottom of it all. In our number 1 spot today, we have the neighbor across the hall. Okay guys, this one is definitely the most serious on this list, and it truly is terrifying. Basically, this storyteller's dad lives in an apartment building, and one day he gets a knock on the door and it turns out to be the police. They come in and start asking this man about his neighbor across the hall. They ask him if he's seen anything weird or that sort of thing, but the dad tells them no. He looks well put together, like a businessman, he's around 30, just nothing out of the ordinary, you know, just a regular guy who just lives across the hall. The police then explain that a 30-year-old woman is missing and that she was last seen on security camera footage walking into the building with that guy, but the security camera never captured either of them leaving. In the end, the police get a warrant and they notice a missing shower curtain and that there's golf clubs everywhere, and at this point they place the neighbor under arrest. Sadly, about 3 weeks later, the police found the missing woman, but someone had taken her life. They then go on to write, quote, "Then about 2 months ago they found more tapes. As the investigators went back to look at them, they discovered the man leaving the apartment with his golf bag. But like I said earlier, all of the clubs were in his room. It definitely doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what is going on here at all. I guess this neighbor guy is now saying that it was an accident and he panicked and tried to hide it because he had a girlfriend." At the time the person posted this story, the guy's trial was coming up, and I'm sure it didn't exactly go well for him. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thank you so much for checking it out. I truly hope you don't live next to any of these people, cause that would just be terrible. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I'll see you next time. Bye!